Hello everybody. As you can see, we're out in the snow, which I think is the perfect setting for the movie we're going to be reviewing today. And that is On Her Majesty's Secret Service, the sixth James Bond film, the only one to star George Lazenby. And if I may add, probably the best Christmas action film. Sorry, Die Hard. But I feel like this movie's undergone something of a renaissance or a reevaluation or rehabilitation over time. From my understanding, when it first came out, people were very critical of Lazenby. They were very critical of the director, of the decisions that were made. And I'm sure there are some legitimate criticisms. But whether you think Lazenby's performance is good, bad, or somewhere in between, I don't think it's fair to shit on him just because he's not Sean Connery. And that he's George Lazenby playing James Bond, not Sean Connery playing James Bond. And I think you have to try to judge his performance on its own merits and not just say it sucks by virtue of it not being Sean Connery. Now, there's takes on Bond that I like. I like Pierce Brosnan and I like Sean Connery. I don't like Daniel Craig's portrayal, but I don't hate Daniel Craig simply because he's a different actor and he's not my favorite Bond actor. And I feel like that's to a certain extent how people feel about Lazenby. Now, Lazenby also only made one film. Now, that was his fault because they offered to give him a bunch more. But he only made one film. It was one of the first films he ever starred in. And if he had had a couple more, maybe he'd get more comfortable in the role. He'd develop more of a style. I think he did a good job considering his lack of experience with a character and as an actor in general. But it's like when people shit on Timothy Dalton. To be fair to Timothy Dalton, from my understanding, The Living Daylights was basically like almost made when they pulled him on set. And License to Kill was really the only film they made that played to his abilities. And it's like, you got to give the guy a couple movies to try to like build something up. Imagine if they only gave Sean Connery Dr. Doan from Russia with Love and you didn't get the Goldfinger performance. So I think that's just to keep in mind. And to be fair, I think you kind of have to give people some credit and give them a little bit of a pass if they're trying to do something a little bit different. And by that I mean they're not trying to shit on their fan base or subvert expectations or be shocking or something. But they're like, maybe we'll just put a little spin on this. We'll try something a little bit new. We'll play around with the formula a bit. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I'm willing to forgive some shortcomings if it's done in the spirit of actually trying to be creative. Which I think whatever the problems with this film are, it largely comes from that and the inexperience of the crew involved. So that being said, let's get into the movie. So On Her Majesty's Secret Service is interestingly, I think, one of the more grounded films. Bond doesn't have very many gadgets in it. The only one I can really think of he has is the safe-cracking device and photocopier at the beginning of the movie. But by and large, he's down to his own wits, his ability with firearms, and his physical fitness to get through problems. And I like the gadgets. That was one of my complaints about the Daniel Craig movies, was you didn't really have many gadgets in them. But in this case, I think they were going for more of a traditional spy thriller. And so them not having the gadgets doesn't really bother me. Most of the action scenes will often very over the top and thrilling and kind of spectacular, feel more like something that could actually happen. The scene that I think in this film and in all the Bond films that most sends a chill down my spine is when Blofeld traps Bond in the ski lift gear room or whatever it's called, and Bond is like over the abyss and he's trying to crawl up the cable of the cable car and get out, and then he has to try to drop off the cable onto the cable car, and it just feels very realistic. You got Bond who's just grunting, who's barely hanging on, who's just desperately trying to get by. And I feel in this movie a lot of the stuff Bond does, it's more of him like struggling or getting knocked down and getting beat up and stuff like that, which I kind of like. And even you have the ski scenes, which are spectacular, but it does feel like something that could actually happen. in real life, which I think is an interesting twist. And after something like You Only Live Twice, I think they wanted to get it a bit more grounded. Even Blofeld's super lair is something a little more realistic. Like in You Only Live Twice, he had the volcano base, which might be the greatest movie set of all time. But here he has Paz Gloria, which is I don't know if you call it a facility, a restaurant, a resort on top of a mountain in Switzerland. Which, I mean, the thing exists. There's no reason you couldn't have something like that. And that is a very remote place, and it is in Switzerland, and it is probably a good spot to have an evil lair. Because it is both remote, but out in the open, if you catch my meaning. I also feel like, similar to Dr. No, Bond does more detective work in this, where he's trying to figure things out. Like he has to go get the documents from the lawyer, he has to go undercover, all this other stuff, and I do appreciate them trying to do more of a traditional spy film. Don't get me wrong, I love movies like GoldenEye and You Only Live Twice that are just this insane, over-the-top stuff, but I also appreciate that they wanted to make it a little more based in reality. Although what's kind of funny with this film is the overall plot is kind of a destroy the world plot. So for those of you who haven't seen the movie, basically what Blofeld's master plan is in this one is he's developed a super version of foot and mouth disease that will cause total sterility in a specific species of plant or animal. And he's brought a whole bunch of women to Paz Gloria under the auspices of fixing their allergies, which he manages to do through a combination of hypnosis and drugs, but he's secretly brainwashing and hypnotizing them, and so he has them spread out all across the world, so there's no easy way to track down all the women that he's programmed. Because if they try to take any one of them down, Blofeld can just trigger the rest of them, and at least some species are going to go extinct. And what he wants is also interesting in that this time he's not asking for money or to control the world, he just wants amnesty. I think with the idea of maybe retiring or going legitimate, or being able to operate more openly in preparation for the next evil scheme. Something else I like about the movie is they try to humanize Blofeld a little, where he's obsessed with trying to become the Count of Blofeld or something. But he really wants a noble title. He really wants to be a blue blood, to be upper class. They call him a snob. And that's just a very Blofeld supervillain thing to do. And he's willing to kind of endanger his plan to get Bond to come there in the guise of Sir Edmund Hillary to try to get himself recognized as a count. Because he just wants it so bad. Because his ego just demands it. And I think it's funny that that's ultimately his undoing, is his ego. And it might seem a little out of place, but I think it makes sense given the character and given the performance that they had in this film. Now, my favorite Blofeld is definitely Donald Pleasance, but I forget his name. The guy who plays him in this movie is pretty good. My issue with some of the later portrayals of Spectre is they kind of stop having all the trademarks of Spectre you have in the earlier movies. Like, you don't have the numbers anymore. You don't have quite the same degree that this is this international evil organization. It's mostly just Blofeld and his minions. You don't have people like Largo or Dr. No or Red Grant or anything anymore. Or I guess Helga Blunt. I always get the two red-haired trolls mixed up. Blofeld's personal hit woman or whatever. But yeah, I like that. Maybe before we get into a bit more of the plot, this one might have the best score of any Bond movie. I do really like GoldenEye as well because of the industrial music. But for this one, I really loved the main rendition of the theme, particularly the version of the theme that plays during the extended ski chase. I just think it's suitably epic. It goes really well with the action scene, with kind of the portrayal that Lazenby tries to bring to Bond. The music in this is just great. I mean, the music's always a highlight in any Bond film. I think there's maybe one or two. I think Spectre, maybe they just reuse the music in it from Quantum of Solace. But it's very rarely that someone sees a Bond movie and goes, okay, the movie was great, but the music really let it down. Oftentimes, even if the movie isn't the best, the opening song is at least good. Now, in this one, we don't really have an opening song. We have a rendition of the main song with the Philharmonic Orchestra or whatever. But to me, we don't have a specific song because the song for this movie is We Have All the Time in the World. A bit like how From Russia with Love, we had the song play later in the movie, whereas it was the Bond song at the beginning. And this brings us to the whole Tracy Bond thing. And I think there's a lot of things you can criticize about the movie and Lazenby's portrayal. I thought that him and Diana Rigg had really good chemistry. I like Diana Rigg's portrayal a lot. I do think we see her go from being a complete brat to being somewhat more responsible and somewhat more put together. Like, she's suicidally depressed and borderline personality disorder at the beginning. And when she kind of falls in love with Bond, and to a certain extent, he kind of puts her in her place. They kind of play off each other really well, and they both kind of reach a higher level of maturity. Bond's kind of happy because he's found this strong-willed woman who can keep up with him. And Tracy's happy that she's found this Giga Chad who can put her in her place. And it's kind of this good chemistry, and I can see that Bond fall in love with her and that this would be kind of the woman where he'd finally settled down. And it is a bit of a fake out at the end, because it does seem like, oh, Bond's finally beat Blofeld. He's going to get married and settle down, but kind of the sins of the past catch up with him. And you can kind of like that or dislike that. But I do think it was one of the more emotional moments. And Lazenby's, when Tracy dies and he's just kind of having the breakdown, I thought was a very good piece of acting. Some people don't like it, but I like that he's just in complete shock. And so he kind of says the first couple lines normally, and then he starts crying towards the end of it. But I like their relationship. Another thing I really liked about it is Tracy's father, Draco. I'm not sure if you pronounce it Draco or Drago, or we'll just say Draco, who's a Corsican mobster. And this movie does a really good job of the travelogue aspect. We get to go to Corsica and Switzerland. And in Switzerland, I think they're training for the Olympics as part of the background. It's Christmas time. So we have all these cool scenes of like a festival in small Swiss towns in the Alps. We got bobsleds, we got skiing, we got fantastical mountain vistas, we have Paz Gloria itself. A lot of it is kind of travelogue-ish, but I honestly like that in Bond films. Like, one of my favorite parts of You Only Live Twice is just looking at what Tokyo in the 1960s looked like, seeing like the villages that they go to, and just some of the other stuff. It does very much feel like it's frozen in a moment, frozen in time, from this exotic place, from a different time that you'll never see again. The Man with the Golden Gun being set in Macau, and the I'm not sure, the South China Sea Islands is also a setting you don't see that often, so I like that aspect of it. But sorry, getting back to Draco. So he wants Bond to marry his daughter. She's like, I need a Chad. I need a Giga Chad to dominate her, to be just this super guy, and to put her in her place, because that's what she wants. She wants a man to put her in her place, which is kind of base, not gonna lie. And he's very much kind of a Mediterranean gangster, in that he's involved in a whole bunch of like illegal, shady stuff, but he truly loves his daughter, to the point where he's basically willing to go to war for her and risk everything, because family is family. So, well, he's technically a bad guy and might be the Bond villain in another film. It is nice to have him there. And Bond doesn't take the money to marry Tracy because he doesn't Bond doesn't do things for money. It's just not what he's motivated by. But he initially considers marrying her to get information on where Blofeld is. But Tracy gives him the information anyways, and then he decides to marry her. But she gets captured by Blofeld, and there's a really funny scene where Blofeld's trying to put the moves on her. Because A, it's Diana Rigg, so I mean anyone would try to put the moves on her. But also because she's Bond's fiance. I don't think he knows that, but she's Bond's GF. She's the woman Bond actually loves. And Blofeld is just like, if I can seduce Bond's GF, if I can cuck James Bond, then I'll be the ultimate Chad. Is I think how Blofeld was kind of going. And then he's like, if you're really nice, I'll make you my countess. And she's like, I'm already a countess. Because she does actually have that title, which I thought was kind of funny, to be honest. But MI6 refuses to help Bond out. So he goes to Draco and he's like, look, dude, we need to get your daughter back. And he's like, I got this, Bond. You're going to be my son-in-law. No one fucks with me and my family. So he gets a bunch of like Hueys together, and he manages to bluff Blofeld into thinking he's like a Red Cross chopper, and he even manages to bluff the Swiss Air Force into thinking that he's a Red Cross chopper. And then they attack Paz Gloria, and Draco's guys just take out all the Spectre guys, and they blow the facility up. And it's just awesome. Once again, it's doing something a little bit different. It's Bond getting help from some criminals. Him kind of going rogue, going off the grid, as it were. And I just think overall it's a really solid movie. It might be a little bit slow, but there is a chase scene that goes on for like 20 minutes in the middle of the movie, which I think is excellent. The music's great. There's a lot of fight scenes that, once again, I think are a lot more grounded than some of the other Bond movies. And I do think it's definitely worth a watch. And I think it's a watch with just keeping an open mind that this isn't going to be exactly the same as a Connery Bond film or any other kind of Bond film. And that Lazenby's doing a different spin on the character. You can like the spin or hate the spin, but I think you have to judge that on its own merits, and not how similar or different he is from Sean Connery. So those are my thoughts on it, and more reviews to come.